Wow. You really should have the view that I have. Yeah, anybody want to come up here and just soak this in? It's Sid had mentioned that I believe you said there were 8 cybersecurity workshops in the past, or maybe this is our 8th. This for me is extremely impressive because I remember that very first one. And it was not this expanded room. It was probably about that leftmost or rightmost number of attendees here. So quite impressive. My name is Doug Wylie, and I'm with SANS Institute. I'd like to start off with just a big thank you to ARC. It's really my pleasure to be here talking about cybersecurity for industry today, because 10 years ago I was talking about cybersecurity for industry, and I can tell you that there were very different conversations, but some very similar conversations that took place even that long ago. There's been a lot of change. We're so fortunate that there has been change and progress, and that's really one of the objectives today, is to take this moment at the kickoff of this event and talk about some of the change that we've seen, some of the progress that we've seen, but also identify the areas that are still challenges for us that will continue to make progress throughout the years with help from so many of you. So really, my gratitude goes out to ARC for giving me this opportunity. Let's go ahead and jump right into some of the content this morning. All right, so for the roughly 200 people here in the room, I would imagine that you could put yourself, your responsibility, your company's objectives into one of these categories, potentially all of these categories. And I chose these black and white pictures as a reminder of where industry started, and couldn't find much older pictures, but this is an important reminder for us because we start to see the automation in industry in some of these pictures. And it is an unstoppable force. It is compelling. There are billions and billions of dollars spent on industrial control, industrial automation for very good reason, because it is so compelling for us to serve the needs for each of us and for companies to derive benefits like increased safety and quality and productivity and profitability, and then the ability to reduce costs and to reduce liability. These are some of the fundamentals of why companies invest in automation. And this is all good. This is an important aspect of industry moving forward, but it's, of course, not that rosy picture everywhere we look, because every decision that we make has some type of a consequence. And you're here this morning as part of this workshop to talk about the importance of cybersecurity, security, and risk management on industry as we make these types of investments. And no matter what name we give to the systems and the systems of systems today, they are more complex. We see automation reaching every corner of the operations of the companies we work for, and the homes that we live in, and the cars that we drive, and the trains that we ride on, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an important item, obviously, because it has such a direct consequence on our business operations and our own health and well-being. So Sid and I, over this past year, like we have done in years past, we're looking for some indicators of what trends are occurring with your help. We do surveys. We reach out to you and ask for your input and aggregate that and try to bring forward some of this meaningful information. And that's one of the objectives this morning, is to share some of those findings, but we're also hitting on some of the key themes that you're going to see carried through in upcoming sessions in the panel discussions. So I think this is hopefully a good way to start the morning off, because we're laying that foundation for what you're going to experience throughout the rest of the day, and certainly the rest of the week as well. So I thought one place to start would be a study I came across that was not conducted by SANS nor ARC. This was conducted by an organization called BDO that is a company focused on public accounting, tax consulting. They reached out across a variety of different industries to evaluate what does communication look like at the board of directors level when it comes to cybersecurity awareness. And regrettably, they didn't run this study in 2018, but the data that we see, or the trend that we see, is kind of what we would expect, but it's encouraging, and that's why I wanted to share it this morning, is that we are seeing the boards of directors now taking an active part at talking about cybersecurity, gaining that awareness. It is a mainstream topic on the agendas of boards. This is progress. As I mentioned, 10 years ago, security was a dirty word. Literally, people were putting their hands in the sand, heads in the sand, probably hands in the sand too. There is progress that's being made, and what we see here is that encouraging side that because it is a discussion topic amongst boards of directors and senior leadership, it means that action has to be taken. It cannot be ignored. We can argue how rapidly action will be taken or what level is being taken, but at least it can't be ignored. And that is real progress that we've seen in industry. And linked to that, of course, is the level of investment that we see being made. And this particular study points out that there is a steady increase in that level of investment, as you would expect. So that communication and the raising awareness and making sure that company leadership is aware of what risk is within an organization is an imperative here, and it can move the needle. It can move the needle in a very positive manner. Let me pull a data point from an industrial IoT study that SANS ran this past year. We reached out and we had, I think, over 200 responders to this particular survey. It was a mix of IT and OT and people in between. And what we see here is that when we look at an organization's confidence in securing industrial IoT devices and the systems that comprise this IoT world, we see different degrees of confidence, but largely there is a growing confidence that this is doable. Security is doable. Defense is doable. What is a bit disturbing on this slide, if you haven't picked it up already, is, let me build this out here, is a difference between how company leadership looks at risk associated with the industrial Internet of Things compared to those in the OT department that every single day are tasked with architecting, managing, protecting these very systems that comprise the operation side of these companies. There's a delta, there's a difference between company leadership and those in this environment. And unfortunately, company leadership believes that there is less risk to their organization than those on the front lines. And I presume that many of you are on the front lines. So we have to figure this out. And the truth is out there. That difference is a result of communication issues. It isn't a technology problem. It could be a process problem, but it absolutely is a communication problem at its heart. What that leads us to is that as we think about building that cyber-skilled workforce, all the investments that we can make at making sure that we understand how to architect systems to protect and secure and segment, and as we expand to cloud and virtualization, we're being responsible with that. We can't lose sight of a key responsibility that all security practitioners have. In fact, every employee that is exposed to risk has this responsibility as well, which is the communications aspect of our roles in the organization. Because if we're not also investing in helping communicate risk up into an organization, then we're really missing the point. We're not going to move the needle. Remember, if we go back to my board of directors slide from earlier, great indication that awareness can result in an increased investment. So building the skilled workforce includes making sure that we can communicate properly about risk. 2017 study that SANS conducted We asked the question, what are the top industrial control system threat vectors? What's on your mind? And in 2017, what you'll see on this slide is that the IoT and IoT, those rated the highest on this particular chart, and underneath that are devices and things. A great indication of the variety and the complexity that we see in today's interconnected systems. And if you walk through each one of these, and you think in the context of ransomware, for instance, the effects of ransomware are actually reaching those endpoints. So it makes sense for us to see results like devices and things being of greatest concern. This is an important topic. You'll hear a lot more about the importance of hardening devices and how that leads into hardening systems, and how important it is to have visibility and a great inventory of your system, which is not static, by the way. That's something that is not a one and done. You have to maintain a view of your overall system. It's an investment that we make. So I think this is an important backdrop because we know the direction that we're heading with our industrial control systems, with our OT systems, our IT systems, interconnected everywhere. In fact, this is not a movement that we're waiting for. It's already happened. I think we all recognize that. On the bottom left there, that's just a plug. If you'd like to participate in the 2019 survey that we've just launched today, please take the opportunity and feed the beast, so to speak. You'll probably see results of that in the future. So haven't we figured this out already? I mean, look at this picture, and I could have used so many different pictures here. I chose one that I'm especially fond of. Haven't we figured this out? Engineering, science, the technology that is tied up in architecture like this, it's really, you should think about how many people were involved at building this, at defining this, at implementing, at installing. Yet we still find ourselves falling prey to the very risk that affects our prime objectives with these systems. And there's a reason for that. Is that, good, it's moving. There we go. Is that these are not static systems. Although we often talk about this set it and forget it mentality. Well, we're going to engineer a system, it's going to operate that way for 20 years, and it's never going to have to change. That's not a reality. It's actually never been a reality. There's always been change introduced to these systems just to maintain them, to replace products that might be end of life, or to apply patches that might improve performance or bring new features. But as we connect systems to systems, we no longer have the control that we once had in the more simplistic control systems that drive our operations. It is a moving goalpost. We cannot have a complete view of all the risks, nor can we ever have control of all the risks. So we don't have this figured out, and Bob Ross there with his happy little clouds is just yet a new element to how we have to put a lot more trust in a much broader ecosystem that we really don't have a clear understanding of what happens as we start to participate and utilize these expanded systems. I talked earlier about the importance of education and communication. This is where I wanted to just lift the sheets a little bit. For those of you that aren't aware, SANS Institute, we're a cybersecurity educator. We have many different courses around many different cybersecurity disciplines. And the reason why I wanted to show this picture is that, of course, we run a business, and I have this ability, because of our industry perspective, to look at where are investments being made in educating people with cybersecurity skills. And I chose these because this is encouraging. Year over year, we're seeing industry sectors make the investment at building the core talent, the core skill set, the knowledge and abilities to move the needle. And what's behind this isn't just a pure industrial control system training course. How do you architect and segment a system? There are forensics classes, there are pen testing, management, legal. This isn't a plug for SANS. This is just a data point to indicate that industry is making a very active investment. And what I would ask is, for each of you in the industries that you participate in, what are you doing to make your own investment at better understanding and addressing and improving the communications within your organizations? Whether it's this or whether it's something else, just really reflect on your security program and make sure that you are finding that balance between people, process, and technology. So let's take another look at some of the greatest risks and threats to industrial IoT devices. This was that same 2018 survey. Actually, this might be the first time I'm showing the 2018 survey. Apologies. So what we see represented here are some of the high points of what has been identified as risks to industrial IoT systems. And I'm going to build this out because what I noticed when I looked at this slide is that lack of industry standards, although it made the list, it was not high on the list. It kind of tells me that there's enough standards that are out there. We probably don't need to write yet another standard. I participate on standards groups, and we just have to remind ourselves that sometimes we're in an echo chamber, and the standard that we're writing is actually one that has been written in years past. I think this is a reflection that at least the responders, which I think is a good representation of industry, says, no, that's not the problem. We have the standards. We know what we need to do. But I highlighted lack of security considerations on this slide, because not only because it's number one, but we have the standards and the guidelines and the best practices, and we can point to all these documents. So why are we still seeing a lack of security considerations in these systems? Somewhere the bridge has not been made. So if we're going to put more energy into the guidelines and the best practices, it's probably not going to move the needle forward here. So asking that question of why aren't we crossing that bridge, if we just very simply say people, process, and technology, it's got to be in one of those three categories, right? That's largely why I think you're here today, is to look for these answers as to what can we do to notably move the needle, to address risk. Let's not go write the next standard. Let's take action and let's actually see some positive results. And looking out over the next 2 years, what we see here, and I'll build this one out, is it's no longer an issue of our vendors giving us the security capabilities in the products and systems. I think we're beyond that. I think if you look at most of the industrial control providers, they're providing the feature set. They're providing the capabilities to enable us to build security into these systems. It's there. It's actually been there for a while. But lack of patching ended up being number one. Is that the vendor's fault? Maybe, maybe not. I'm sure you have your own answer and your own response to that. But lack of patching, it's really an end user's problem. And the question to ask here might be is, what is your relationship with your vendors and your suppliers to address lack of patching, given that it's one of your greatest concerns in the next 2 years? But is it really a concern? You know, we talk about patching all the time and the challenges with it, but is it really a concern? So normally, I've used this slide before, and normally I like to have someone to play off of here, to patch or not to patch, because there are absolutely positives and negatives to that. And many of you that are responsible for managing systems know this very well. Well, I run the operation 24/7. It never stops. And I've said this before, I think even up here, we're dealing with the problem of changing tires on a moving vehicle. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a patch strategy. It doesn't mean that we can't anticipate or create, rather, opportunities to address this problem. Yes, it is a concern, but it shouldn't be something that we just ignore. And we can also argue the benefits that come with patching, because those benefits can be quickly offset by new risks that are introduced. Those of you that are in regulated industries know this well. You can't just run out and apply an upgrade. It's a calculated effort for good reason, because there's almost always consequences relating to that. So looking closer at patches, I liked the work that Dragos did this past year, analyzing the vulnerability disclosures and alerts that were issued by the ICS CERT, where they looked at 163 reported vulnerabilities and placed some categories on what are the impacts and consequences from these types of vulnerability disclosures. And you can see the results here: loss of view, loss of control, combination of both. Is this compelling enough to move you to take action, to say we need a patch management strategy because we have a potential here to see a loss of control or a loss of view? This should be pretty compelling, because this gets at the fundamentals of why we're investing in automation in the first place: productivity, efficiency, profitability, all of those. But does this really change your answer? Go back to that earlier slide of the positives and the negatives. There's a lot of us that will justify inaction and come up with plenty of good reasons not to take action. And I'm not suggesting that I have an answer for you. This is really just one of those thought-provoking, opportunities this morning here to get you thinking about the responsibility you take and the actions that you take, and what is compelling. What is the information that you need to move your organization forward and communicate accurately with those that can take action? So how do we get in front of cybersecurity risks? Again, great reason why you're here this morning is looking for answers to that very question. And communications has been at least a sub-theme of my talk this morning here. And going back to that earlier BDO study, I had noticed that we're not really that open to sharing information. And every year for the last 15 years, I have myself said it, and I've heard so many other people say that we just need more information sharing. This is a great indicator of why we need to keep saying this, is the 25% within an organization that are sharing information, here's how it's being shared. Where's it going? It's going to the government agencies, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security. I watch the Science Channel a lot. Anybody else watch the Science Channel? I'm sure a lot of you do. Okay. I love those shows about black holes, about the event horizon, how information gets sucked in and never comes out. Look at where your information is going when you're sharing with the government agencies. It might pop back out, but it sure isn't going to happen fast. The information sharing analysis centers, they're picking up some aspect of that information as well. At least that's an industry effort, and at least that has the ability to feed back out to the community. But I highlighted competitors for a specific reason. It's that if our organizations are being affected so directly, and we're pushing information to the government or to the ISAC, and we're not reaching our peers in industry very directly, where a CISO picks up the phone and talks to another CISO and says, hey, here's the deal. We're both in the oil and gas industry. We both own a pipeline. This is what I'm seeing, and this is very disturbing. We're taking action, but you might want to open your eyes and go check some things out. If we're not having that level of interaction company to company because we're letting the competitive forces get in the way, that's not good for industry, that's not good for society. So this funnel, the 25% that are sharing information, I think are missing an opportunity here for direct outreach, to tear down those competitors' walls and pick up the phone and realize that we all share the consequences that can come with the events that are affecting the very systems that we depend upon. So I'll close on this slide to say, 10 years ago, the concept of a security program in a company was foreign. Sounded expensive. I gotta go hire a bunch of people. I have to decide on what framework I'm going to follow, probably train up a ton of people. Those things still apply, by the way. What some organizations have realized is that security doesn't have to be a scary word. In fact, the reason why I've listed this and built this way is to demonstrate to you that you're probably and have likely been investing in security and risk management for a very long time and not even realize it. You don't necessarily have to build a security program from scratch, but you can reach into other areas of your organization where you're already making investments in risk management and begin to formulate your own security program. And I think that's the progress that we have seen, especially in the last few years here, is organizations now realize that risk isn't something isolated to the IT group. It's not just isolated to the OT group. This is a company-wide issue. And the programs across the organization can benefit greatly by harmonizing and really finding a way to leverage the skill set that's already in place. And for the gaps, go get trained. Go invest in people, process, and technology. But don't, be part of that communication stream that is out promoting the fact that we aren't starting from scratch anymore. There's a lot that is in place. And I'm looking forward to next year and years that come where we continue to see expanded security programs that are just called risk management programs. I think that will be a sign of maturity is when we stop talking so much about cybersecurity and we just start talking about risk and risk management in the organizations, because that is the expansive definition to what we're all really doing here today. All right. So Sid, I'm going to end here, and that's probably the most key statistic from this entire slide deck. So thank you.